Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Balancing Heaven and Earth on the Star Nations Radio Network via Facebook live stream and Be Live TV. This is your show host, Denise Iwaniw-Francisco. Welcome to a night of balancing heaven and earth. And so tonight I thought I was just going to, produce here in one of my favorite cozy spots here in the house. This is one of my reading corners. It's where I like to tuck in and read, and sometimes Gabriel is on my lap, and sometimes Gabriel and Merlin are on my lap. And I thought, well, I think I'm just going to nest in right there and enjoy an evening of balancing heaven and earth with all of you. And it's good to have you with me. Just going to pop up a little something so you know who it is that's talking at you and what is going on. And I'm going to get comfy in my chair, in my fun reading chair. So for those of you that happen to be listening, if you could share this, that would be fantastic. And if you are watching, if you could just let me know that you are out there, that would be terrific as well. So I'd like to begin this evening by thanking New England, and specifically thanking Sandra Herrick, Brenda Edwards, Carrie Hayes, oh my goodness, Susan Brown, Patricia Walia, everyone who contributed to an amazing weekend in New England. It was so good to see. Hey, Sonia, how are you? Good evening. It's good to see you. It was an astounding weekend from start to finish. We even managed to have a Gathering Thunder Foundation fundraiser in and amongst all of the activities that were going on. So that was terrific, helping to raise some money for the young ones at Gather Our Children Home. Winter is settling in, and I'm assuming they're going to need some new jackets here pretty soon. So we raised some funds to purchase some new coats for the little ones at Gather Our Children Home. Good evening, Holly. Hi, Rob. It's good to have you with us. And Rob, I know that you have an upcoming gig with Julie Hedges. And if you would share that in the stream or somewhere on Balancing Heaven and Earth on the page, that would be terrific. As you know, we've changed the format. And now, rather than having an event page where we will be having discussion, I'm going to be broadcasting directly from Balancing Heaven and Earth's page. And so please, during our times together, feel free to acknowledge anything that you may have going on, classes or events or any of that good kind of a thing. It's important that we share with one another what we have going on. And for those of you that have never seen Rob and Julie Hedges in action, singing and playing music, they are a dynamic duo, absolutely outstanding. So they're going to be at the Raven Cafe coming up in Port Huron. And if you're anywhere near the Canadian border, right over there near Port Huron, I highly recommend that you go to see them sing and play. They are outstanding. And the Raven Cafe is incredible. Thank you for that, Neshi. Fantastic. So here we are with this new format, Be Live TV, live streaming. It's exciting, and I know that all of you are enjoying being able to see your favorite show hosts face to face and get to see what they look like and feel like, the energy around them. And I'm excited about the new format myself. Got to spend some time this weekend with a couple of our show hosts, Polly Jo LeBay and also Meg Annutto. Meg and I shared a few laughs there at the Universalist Church in Keene. And Meg, if you're watching, thank you for the chuckles and the laughter. It was good to see you and your son, Alex. Pat Fox, thank you for advertising in Star Nations magazine and for traveling all the way from your home in Massachusetts up to New Hampshire to be with us. Sandy and I on Saturday evening. Can't thank you enough for that. That was fantastic to see you. And Sue Madewell, all of you, Linda Claflin. It was fantastic to be with the crew from New Hampshire. And of course, to everybody at the Dusty Dog Farm and Equestrian Center, it was great to be with the horses. It was great to be with everyone. And also at the Mustang Ranch, where Sue Madewell houses her beautiful Mustangs, Del Winnie and Dylan. It was great to be with all of the horses and all the farm critters. And of course, Unicorn Fields, the home of Sandra Herrick and Bobby Hall. Oh my goodness, doesn't get any better. I got to be out there with the miniature horses and donkeys and alpacas and geese and goats and chickens, and a slice of heaven on earth for me. So to everyone from New England who attended this weekend and those that weren't able to, sending my love to you from Michigan on behalf of all of us at Star Nations. Thank you for being there for what we have determined is either the 9th or the 10th year of On the Road to Heaven with Sandy and I. What an honor and a privilege to have each and every one of you in our lives. Good evening, Lily. Hey, Jocelyn. Hey, Kelly Spencer. It's good to love up the grandbabies. I was just looking at Todd's Facebook page, and our grandson Ronan left a little video message for Grandma and Grandpa on Todd's page. He's selling for the first time Cub Scout popcorn. You know, he's a member of the Boy Scouts now. So, of course, Grandma and Grandpa had to get right in there and place the order for those kinds of things. And it makes my heart feel so good to look at that little beautiful face saying, I love you, Grandpa and Grandma. Does it get any better? I don't think so. I think that that's pretty sacred. And Kelly's little grandbabies, oh my goodness, Hank and Lucy. Oh, that's all I can say. Yeah. Oh, and Auntie Kelly ordered also some popcorn. It takes a community. It takes a village. This afternoon, late this afternoon, Todd and I attended the scholarship awards for Elise. And Elise, as everyone knows, just made it into nursing school. She passed all of her prerequisite education and she was admitted into nursing school. And tonight was her scholarship award ceremony. And Todd and I went to Montcalm Community College to watch her receive her scholarships for nursing. And it's a really sacred moment. Being a parent, being a grandparent is a very sacred thing. And tonight we're going to talk about sacred. What is sacred? How is sacred very individualized? Right? We all have our own definition of sacred or walking in a sacred manner. As I was, thinking about Elise's award ceremony as she's going to be receiving her scholarships this afternoon, I was looking through some photos and I found a photo from her wedding. And there she is with her Auntie Dell and her Auntie Barb and Auntie Sandy and Darlene. And I got to thinking about, it really is a matter of a village. It takes a village of each and every one of us to take care of each and every one of us. That's sacred in my mind. And you're welcome, Rob, for the plug, right? Some people ask me, Dana, why do you do that? Why do you plug other people's things? Why are you so excited if Julie Hedges publishes a book or Minnie Kansman or Rob is playing a guitar or, helping people vote for Nicole Werner's photography? I happen to think that relationships are very sacred. Relationships are very sacred, and I do believe that every encounter that we have with one another is a holy encounter. Kelly Spencer and I are going to be doing a show on friendships, on that wonderful passage from Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season, and a season, a reason, or a lifetime in relationships. Relationships are very sacred things. Relationships with one another, relationships with our friends, relationship with family, by whatever definition we call family. Yeah, you're my family. Look at all these people. I love it. Oh, thank you, Lily. Yeah, this is the first time Elise actually has attended a scholarship ceremony. She receives scholarships quite often, and yet this was the first time that she invited others to go and to be recognized publicly. And I said to her, Elise, this is a sacred moment in your progression, in your soul's avocation to becoming a nurse, to becoming a healer. And this past weekend, having dinner, Sandy Herrick's birthday, she's going to be 70 on the 26th. But, we decided we were going to do a little something, something. Lily and I got the ball rolling with Sue Madewell and Patty Babbitt and the gang there in New Hampshire about having a pre-birthday party for Sandy to help her celebrate turning 70. And what a beautiful thing to have friends that, I don't see all that often, but I see them, at least once, twice, 3 times a year. Phaedra and Sue Madewell to say, if your daughter needs anything in her education to become a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant, we're here. We're here for her to help mentor her into becoming everything that she is going to become and she is becoming. And that's sacred. That's sacred. And that's where we're going this evening, is with sacred. And now that I have new glasses, as you can see, bifocals even, how fun is that? I can now read your comments on the stream. Before, when I was just reading readers, it was a little discombobulated. So now we can have conversation, everybody. You lift people because you are born to raise people up. I love to raise people up. I like to help them shine. I love to give them opportunity to shine. And that is why I call out things when friends and family have successes or have a light to shine and maybe know where to shine it. I like to be able to help, have a place for somebody to shine or to recognize their shininess. And I think that it's sacred to help light another person's candle, to help light another person's flame. So that's sacred. Yes. And you're looking good, girlfriend. I love. Thanks, Kel. I know they asked me, so Denise, do you want progressive lenses or do you want the old-fashioned bifocals? I said, just give me the old-fashioned bifocals. I love the color. It's funky, and I don't really care about that other. It is what it is. And folks on Wednesday night and Tuesday mornings will be just fine with however I show up. So here we are. Sacred. What does sacred mean to you? Anybody here in the chat room, what does sacred mean to you? Who is sacred to you? Do you hold your own self as being sacred, as a sacred being? Just curious, your definition of sacred. To me, sacred is not secret. Some people think that if something is sacred, it's a secret. Shh, don't tell anybody because it's sacred and therefore no one can know. Only the people at the top can know. Don't tell because it's sacred. Well, I happen to believe that sacred doesn't necessarily mean secret, which has gotten me into some very interesting conversations over time with why it is that I publish the things that I do, my books, my CDs, the empowerment decks, all of it. Denise, why are you publishing those things? That's sacred information. Why are you sharing that? That should be secret. That should just be a secret. I once had that discussion with a rabbi over my book, A Year of Mystic Angels, and the Mystic Angels Empowerment Deck. Denise, you shouldn't be publishing those things. That sacred information has been sacred since the beginning of time. And why are you doing this? And I remember looking at the rabbi and saying, well, I guess, Rabbi, you and I are going to have to disagree or agree to disagree. How is anybody going to know anything that's sacred if nobody talks about sacred texts, sacred teachings? I happen to believe that the fact of the matter is, with a lot of stuff that people hold as secret, shh, don't tell anybody, we all read, we all feel, we all hear what we are capable of seeing, what we are capable of hearing. And those with eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to feel will feel what it is that they are ready to feel. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that, Margaret. Margaret is saying sacred is special and reverent. Yeah. Beautiful. I agree with that. Sacred is special. Sacred is reverent. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. For those of you that are just finding me now for the very first time on the Facebook page, Balancing Heaven and Earth. Hey, Cindy Lynn. It's good to have you with us this evening. For me, what is sacred is whatever helps link us to the divine, says Holly. Thank you for that, Holly. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. We all have our own definition of what is sacred. You know, there are certain teachings and things that are not necessarily for those that are beginning the path. And so as a teacher, it's up to me to maneuver and understand what students may or may not be ready for and act appropriately within a group regarding the information that I am giving or ceremony that I am holding. There are certain classes that I hold that I know that are not ready, perhaps newbies are not ready for, or those just beginning the class. No different than somebody who is starting off as a freshman in college wanting straight away to take PhD level classes. Right? There's a progression. So I'm not saying that sacred is something that should instantaneously be revealed, but it should be revealed in my mind to those who are ready and present for the teachings, that are prepared. I don't think that they should be held away from everybody for all time, except for the elect few that happen to be at the top of the food chain in an organization or what have you. Sacred is sacred. And I do believe that there are levels of teachings that should be presented safely and in a sound, sacred manner to those who are searching for them and looking for them. Divine. Sacred is that which is set aside for divine work, says Rob. Thank you for that. I like that as well. Sacred. I don't think any two people really have the same idea about any certain subject. And so this is why I want to talk about this tonight. Sacred, and how do we walk in a sacred manner with sacred teaching, sacred relationships? Some people hold sacred closer to the vest. Some people are an open book with sacred. Some people, on Facebook, boy, some people just lay it all out there, don't they, on Facebook? And so the sacredness of their life, they may say, is like an open book. So we each have degrees of talking about what is sacred in our lives, displaying what is sacred in our lives, sharing what is sacred in our lives. Yes. Yeah, taking a look. Go ahead, girl, say it. Well, some people, man, they just put it all out there. And I think to myself, wow, do you realize that if you put it out there, it is out there for good? It is out there for eternity, out there in cyberspace, right? What we talk about on these shows, our radio shows, it is out there. So, and some people are cool with that, and that's great. I have no judgment about it. We all hold sacred here, real close, or here, or here. Hey, everybody, here it is. Sacred. Walking in a sacred manner. What does that mean? Oh, Rob is saying, you're welcome, but I borrowed that from my theology profs. Yes. Rob is a theology student. It is out there for good and ill. Yeah. When we put things out there, some people will say, well, Denise, how come you don't have like photos of your sweat lodge on Facebook? Why are there never allowed any photos of your sweat lodge on Facebook or your altar? Why is that never just out there? Well, because it's a sacred altar. To me, that is so sacred that I would never display a photo of it on Facebook or Twitter or any of that sort of a thing. To me, I hold it so sacred that if you experience my altar, my hochoka, then you've experienced it firsthand and personally, and it's there with you in your heart, having experienced it. Having experienced it. My relationship with my husband, you can see this photo that Nicole Werner took. Right? Nicole Werner, photographer extraordinaire. She is our executive photog at Star Nations magazine. Took this photo of Todd and I. My relationship with Todd is very sacred. And so you don't see me on Facebook blah, blah, blahing about every emotional thing or every intimate thing that happens between me and my husband. That's between me and my husband. What happens at my altar, my hochoka, is between me and that altar. Because I happen to believe that all things are sacred, and I hold them to varying degrees as sacred, and some are shared publicly and some are not shared publicly. And when we begin to talk about the sacredness of spirit or the sacredness of sacred ceremonies, we're then involving the unseen world. As you know, I'm getting ready to release my new book, Prayers and Incantations to the Light, Blessings from the Mother. And thank you to all of you all over Grandmother Earth who have ordered a copy of this book already, pre-ordered it to have me sign it. I'm going to leave that open through the end of the week to pre-order books, either in the soft cover or the hard cover, and I will sign the pre-ordered copies. Prayers and Incantations to the Light, sacred prayers for sacred ceremonies. Either personal ceremonies, community ceremonies. Sacred ceremony involves not only human beings who attend the sacred ceremonies. Sacred ceremony also involves spirit, the unseen world. Sacred ceremonies are something that I'm particularly intrigued by, that I enjoy immensely, the depth of them and the sacredness of them. I think I can say with assuredness that you'll never see me here on Star Nations Radio Network on Be Live performing a sweat lodge in EP or a pipe ceremony. Those are held sacred, I believe, into the circle of people that are gathered. We had a pipe ceremony this weekend on Sunday, or was it Saturday? It was either Saturday or Sunday, to raise funds for Gathering Thunder Foundation. When the ceremony was complete, Carmen Kerrigan asked if she could take a photo. The ceremony was finished. It was wrapped up. It was tidied up. Everything was complete. And that was fine. But photographs during the ceremony, no. No. That was a magical moment. It was so tender and loving, beautiful. Oh, thank you, Kelly. Yeah. Kelly was there while Nicole was taking this photo of Todd and I in our dining room. My relationship with friends, that's sacred. You know, Kelly and I doing a show together about our sacred relationship. What does it mean to have a sacred friendship? What does it mean to have sacredness in family? What does that mean? How do we walk in a sacred manner? When we're talking about sacred ceremony, I happen to believe that our interaction with spirit is every bit as sacred as our interactions with one another. Whether we're at a wedding, a funeral, a baptism, any of those sorts of a thing, bar mitzvah, the rabbi, the priest, the minister, the officiant, always invokes the presence of spirit. And some people like to have their sacred ceremonies broadcast. To me, I was always taught that in those sacred ceremonies, particularly those that involve the inipi or that involve the chinupa, we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't take photos and display them. We don't videotape all of that going on because spirit is involved, and it's that sacred that not everybody holds sacred the same way that I hold sacred. What I find sacred about the sweat lodge, somebody else might find nothing about it sacred. And the moment that they watch it, it can lose its sacredness. It can be diffused by. And there's nothing worse than that. It's like having a really great idea and you tell somebody and they say, well, what do you want to do that for? And all of a sudden, your great idea, your enthusiasm is diffused. Same thing in sacred ceremony. If somebody catches a glimpse of it, or you know what I'm saying, sacred is sacred. Sacred to me is not secret, but it is held in such high regard that I'm very discerning with whom I share it. I'm very discerning about whom I share my relationship with my husband or my children. Some people, there's not much discerning that goes on. Photographs only record light. They can't show spirit, says Rob. Okay, Rob. I have a feeling, I think you're being sarcastic in that, right? That's a whole discussion right there. All right, there we go. Kelly saying, I can't wait for that discussion. Yes, held in high regard. Sacred ceremony is alchemical. Rob is saying no. Well, we'll just have to have a discussion about that, Rob. I'd like to get your point of view on that at some point, maybe this weekend, right? What's contained in the light that's being captured? What's contained in the light that's being captured? Living in a holographic universe as we are. Interesting. Well, this weekend, on Saturday, I'm going to be teaching a class in archangels, angels, and demons. Right? Angels, archangels, and demons. Well, you know, that's a pretty sacred subject, angels, archangels, and demons. And I've been teaching this series for a year. I'll be continuing it along with a curriculum in sacred, what do I want to say? Sacred, not sacred ceremonies, rituals. In 2018, I'm going to be teaching rituals and part 2 of angelology. Sometimes there are people that want to jump right into a certain subject that I'm teaching. And I know that in my heart of hearts and in my brain that they are perhaps not ready to have that discussion or to be in that energy. And so knowing that it's a sacred subject and knowing that we're all sacred in a sacred manner, sometimes I say to people, I don't think you're ready for that class. And not for any other reason that the subject matter is sacred and understanding the sacred energies of some sacred subjects. Oh, good, Sonia, you'll be able to join us. Yes, Jocelyn, I agree. Some photographs show spirit. Yeah, I was once at a ceremony in which some artifacts had been returned from the Smithsonian. They were ancient artifacts. Actually, they were artifacts that were clothing that belonged to a tribal elder. And the Wakam, Wichasha Wakam that I was with, burned those articles of clothing in a fire. And right before our eyes, as the clothing was burned, we could see the person who had owned the clothing. And somebody actually took a photo of that moment, and you could see this person on their horse very, very clearly. Very, very clearly, rising up out of the fire as their clothing, their remnants of their life were being burned in a sacred fire. I was kind of surprised that the photograph was taken, except that the holy man wanted to see if something like that could be captured on film. And it was captured on film on a Polaroid camera that evening. So that was pretty astounding to see that. And one of those that you have to kind of see to believe, but I was there at the time, and there it was. So not only did I see it in the fire, but I was able then moments later to see it on the Polaroid photograph. Very interesting. Holly is saying, I find orbs, Sonia. There were about 20, oh my goodness, around a horse I knew that was a healer. I know there's a lot of debate and discussion about orbs and what they are and where they come from and all of that good kind of a thing. All right, but I think we're always learning and being open to the idea that spirit shows itself in many ways. Rob is saying, it depends on the optics of the lens and film. I may be wrong. Yeah, I mean, we're all learning about all of that. And I think that that's fantastic. I so enjoy having conversations with other people that are students of the sacred and seekers of the sacred, right? We can't always just assume that we're right about everything. I think that's something that comes with age. I think when I was about 30 and then 40, I was right. You know what? My goodness, woman, you're going to spend the rest of all of your lifetimes learning what all there is to learn about the sacred. Oh my goodness. So here we are all learning together. What is the sacred? How do you walk in a sacred manner? How are you sacred? How do you see sacred? And if you see sacred, what is that for you? How do you treat people if you're trying to walk in a sacred manner? I think the sacred walk is kind of the mitakuyasan, we're all related walk. We're all related. This weekend, when we were at one of the events, somebody brought up Standing Rock. Maybe Lily, you'll remember. Maybe it was at the church in Keene, the Unitarian Universalist Church. I think I got it right that time. And Sandy brought up the fact that my Lakota relatives are all adopted. They are not my blood relatives. She brought that up. And it began a little bit of a conversation about, but what is sacred relationship? And as I told the group in front of me, the fact of the matter is, other than my daughter and my son, Dana and Elise, everybody in my life is an adopted relative. Everybody. And I don't hold one adoptive relative more my relative than another. I mean, some I like more than the other, but I think that's true in everybody's family, right? Right. And so we started this discussion about sacred relationship. And sometimes, frankly, adoptive relationships are much more sacred than bloodline relationships. And that's the truth as far as I can see it, and I've observed it. Right? So sacred relationships have varying degrees of sacredness. What is Margaret saying? Do you guide them to what they are ready for as far as sacred? Or is it a personal choice? Well, I do guide, if you're talking about my students, Margaret, I do help to guide my students. I think as a teacher, my job is to be a guide, not to be the end-all, be-all, know everything, but to guide them into the teachings that they need to enhance their own soul's avocation. Yes, and there are some teachings that, if somebody comes to me and they've never heard of a chakra, or they're just beginning to understand that there's more to life than what they physically see, I'm not going to invite them to a class on demonology. If they're just asking the question, Denise, I heard this word chakra, what does that mean? I'm going to get them to the right class or perhaps the correct book so that they can begin in a progression, so that they have a firm foundation in their sacred education, rather than to go from what's a chakra to let's talk about demons and how they manifest and how they're handled and blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's a great question, Margaret. I do believe that there needs to be a very firm foundation for sacred teachings so that the teachings can be built upon one another, rather than taking the Corvette off of the showroom floor 300 miles an hour and hoping that you know how to steer it right off of the get-go. Because I have seen people that have actually almost like spontaneous human combustion, combusted because they were brought into teachings that energetically, mentally, emotionally, they were not ready for. Yes, and I've seen some very tragic things. Luckily, that's not been the case in any of my classes, but I have been part of other situations, other classes with other teachers where students have imploded because they were not brought along at a cadence that was healthy for them. Am I saying that students are not responsible for their own cadence in learning and understanding? No, we are all very responsible for discerning what we are ready for and when, but sometimes we don't know, and we need a teacher to guide us in a safe manner. No different than a medical student first year, right? Yay, I got into medical school, and the next day finding themselves in the OR doing a heart transplant. Everything in timing. And that's just from all of my years of teaching and learning and exploring and being a student. What a great question that was, Margaret. Thank you for asking. Sacred teachings are not sacred to everybody. And I take sacred teachings, I respect them. I'll put it that way. And I respect the energy of them, the holographic energy of them, right? How do you know the right teacher? Well, that's a great question too. I always know the right teacher because I ask a lot of questions. Sometimes our gut feels that this may or may not be a good teacher. Anybody else in the thread want to help Margaret with that one? Who's a good teacher of the sacred? Sometimes we can feel it, that there's a good fit. It feels right. And if it feels right, if a teacher, keeps being brought up into your realm of community, or a certain book keeps being brought into your awareness, pay attention to that, because our teachers do come along in divine timing. When the student is ready, they say the teacher shows up. And then after we think, maybe this is a really good, she says, I usually go by gut. And after you go by gut, I think and feel it's really good to ask some questions. Where did you learn from? Cindy Lynn is saying, you, Dana, and I just knew. Thank you for that. Ampe tu ashte chue. My sister Del Marie is in the chat. It's good to see you, sister. So ask questions. It's always good to ask questions. If somebody asks me a question and they ask it in a nice way, there are some people that don't know how to ask a question nicely, right? There are some people who just don't know how to do much of anything nicely, frankly. But if I'm asked in a sincere way, yes, healthy discernment, I am happy, more than happy to answer questions about who did I learn from? Who taught me? Who are my teachers? Am I still learning? I'm more than happy to answer those questions. It wasn't that long ago that I was asked the question, well, who taught you about the Chanupa? Well, this past weekend. Denise, where did you learn that? How did it come to you? Who teaches you? Have you learned everything you need to learn with that? I mean, they were good, honest questions. And my answer was, no, I don't know. I don't know everything about it, and I feel like I'm a babe in the woods. And oftentimes I will defer questions to my sisters, Della or Del Marie or Barbara, when it comes to the pipe, to the chanupa or the inipi or those sorts of things. So it's good to ask questions. And if a teacher just looks at you like, why are you bothering me with your questions? Well, then that might be an indicator that maybe that's not the teacher of sacred studies for you. What a great discussion, Margaret. Thank you for bringing that up. Nikki is saying, for me, it's a feeling. When I started out, I had a few teachers, but then Dana's name was brought up and something inside me said, I need to meet this woman. And when I did, I knew then. Well, thank you for that, Nikki. Well, Nikki's first class with me, she had just been to a sacred circle in which the teacher literally hit her on the hand, punished her for being out of sync with her sacred drum. To me, that is not a sacred teacher. That's a teacher with a really big ego that maybe was a nun in a past life. I don't know. And that's how I met Nikki. Allowing thinking for yourself is also a good start. Absolutely. We get into some of the best discussions about sacred everything in class, and I love it. Just like these evenings, Wednesday evenings. Wonderful discussion. Todd is saying, also can depend on what path resonates with you and someone that you feel like you can trust. Some teachers are really good at one particular path, and others have a strong understanding across many paths. The key is to think for yourself. Yes, absolutely. Being a teacher is not about being a guru, right? I'm not a guru, I'm a teacher, kind of like the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz, pointing this way or that way. Yeah, Nikki, that did happen to her. It took a while for Nikki to actually pick up a drum after that. Teachers that chastise, I don't think are sacred teachers. One of the things that I've learned over time, and maybe Del, you can talk about this, Chue, if you would. In the teachings that are shared with me, the teachings that are received from any of my Lakota relatives or teachers that I hold in high regard, including Arval Looking Horse, Jim Miller, all of them. They are very sacred people who hold sacred teachings in a very deep manner, but they do not belittle. They would certainly not strike out at anyone. They are not harsh and condemning. They are very gentle and firm in their teachings. Very gentle and firm. And that is one of the things that I love most. I love most about my Lakota family is the firmness and the gentleness with which, they teach me. That's acting in a sacred way. I've seen my sister Della teach some things, very spur of the moment, and in correcting someone. And she's very open and honest in her correcting of someone, but it's always done with a gentle voice in a sacred manner. In a sacred manner. Maybe, Chue, you can talk about why that is, that true teachers in the Lakota tradition are very firm, and they're very firm, but they're gentle. And there's always an element of laughter in the teachings. Always, always, always. If you can't, for me, I've had people leave my classes before because I allow laughter. True story. I had one lady who had recently moved here from Germany, who came to one of my energy healing classes. And I think Cad was in that class at that time. And we busted out laughing about something that happened in the class. I don't know what it was, but we could not contain our laughter. And she got up and she walked out because in her mind, sacred and laughter have no place together. None whatsoever. And she was absolutely horrified that in an energy healing class, I would allow laughter. And in fact, that I would incite laughter and laugh at the laughter that was incited. But the irony was, years later, I saw this woman up north and she said, Denise, I don't know if you remember me. I came to your class and I remembered her right away. And she said to me, it was about 6 years ago, she said that I came to your class and I've learned some things since then. She said, you know, I'd recently moved from Germany and I was just getting into energy healing. And I was appalled that you allowed laughter in your class. And she said, what I've learned since then is the value of laughter. And that laughter in itself is healing. I happen to believe that's true. Laughter is very healing. There's a lot of laughter in my household, a lot of goofiness that goes on. And sometimes that extrapolates into the classroom as well, because laughter is good medicine. It's beautiful medicine. Yeah. Well, clearly she was in the wrong classes, Kelly. Yeah, well, I think, you know, I give her a lot of credit for all those years later saying, I owe you an apology for storming out of your class because laughter was allowed. And then to admit that, in fact, she had learned the value of laughter. And so maybe there wasn't much laughter going on in her life growing up in Germany. I don't know. But I happen to feel that laughter, appropriate laughter, not laughing at people, you know what I'm talking about, is very sacred, sacred laughter. It's like sacred tears. Tears can be sacred. Lily, if you happen to still be in the chat room, on this, I think it was Sunday afternoon gallery, there was a beautiful older woman. Yes, just the wrong timing, says Kelly. Yeah. Oh my. Well, you know how much we laugh, right? Good laughter. Well, there was a woman in class. Well, it was in our reading salon that was at Sarah's house. Sarah, if you happen to be watching, thank you for hosting Sandy and me. And there was an elderly woman in the class who was weeping. Oh, okay. Hi, Lily. Sonia's saying, well, you know, us Germans are a serious bunch. Well, you're not so serious anymore. That's all I can say. And neither is this other woman. But you have a great laugh, great laughter. So this elderly woman began weeping. And why was she weeping? Because she was beating herself up for being a crier. For being a crier. She said, I cry all the time. And I cry sometimes at the smallest things. I cry when I'm with groups of people. And Sandy asked the question, well, how do you feel after you're done weeping, after you're done crying? How do you feel? And she said, I feel wonderful. I feel relieved. I feel balanced. I feel good. And I looked at this beautiful woman and I said, have you ever considered that perhaps you are a sacred crier? And she said, a sacred crier? I said, do you know that in some cultures they actually bring people to funerals to cry? Because in some cultures, crying is not allowed. It's a sign of weakness. Being stoic is seen as being virtuous. And so criers, sacred criers, are brought in to share the tears that others, or shed the tears that others are unable to shed, that are told they shouldn't shed. And she looked at me. I said, I would say that one of your gifts of the Spirit is your gift of crying. It is an expression of the charismata to be able to cry on behalf of others. Some people bleed on behalf of others. Some people cry on behalf of others. And she started to cry, and I said, how does that make you feel when you hear those words about being a sacred crier? And she said, Denise, that feels right to me. And I've never thought of myself as sacred. And I've never thought of my tears as being sacred. Yes, Jan Francisco. Yes, Janice, you are a sacred crier. Well, I do believe, and maybe Lily, you can affirm this, that by the time we were done, she felt differently about herself, and she felt differently of her 60 or 70 years of being a crier. And instead of beating up on herself, she was beginning to recognize that perhaps she was being of spiritual service to others. Just a thought. Oh, Dr. Buss, Margaret's saying, I met you years ago at Dr. Buss's and we laughed. Oh my God. If you see her, please tell her I said hello. I love Dr. Buss. Oh, thank you. And I believe laughter is valuable. Yes. I don't have too many people in my life that don't know how to laugh, because I love to laugh. Laughter is good. You got to laugh at yourself too. Absolutely. Yeah, I love Pam Buss. She is phenomenal. She is just phenomenal. If you would tell her I said hello and give her a hug for me, that would be great. Down there in Evansville, Indiana way. She is something else. Sacred relationships. I happen to believe that we have a lot of sacred relationships, and we come into this lifetime knowing that some relationships are going to be very sacred. And in divine timing, those sacred relationships are revealed and we're invited into them. And how we walk with them once we're invited into them. You know, for whether it's supposed to be a sacred relationship for 5 minutes at a store, a few months, a few weeks, a few years, a lifetime. And then there are those sacred relationships that part only to come back, right? Kelly and I are a good example of that. Sacred relationships. Some people don't particularly find relationships as being sacred. Relationship between student and a teacher, very, very sacred, I happen to believe. And having discernment is a very, very good thing as well in relationship. Why weep when you can beat your heart numb? Yeah, some people do that. Well, I was raised in a family, you know, one of the Sarge's rules were you don't cry. And that was just something that we were not allowed to do. There's no crying. And so I joked today that, boy, at least a couple of times a year, I muster up a really good cry. But I grew up in a family, in a military household where crying is weakness and crying is not allowed. And so I'm learning how to do that. It's not something that I do very easily. Yeah, Kelly says, ouch. Yeah, that was not allowed. And there were actually punishments sometimes for displaying tears. And yet, ironically, just a couple of months ago, up with my relatives on Pine Ridge, I went through the wiping of the tears, which is a sacred ceremony to wipe the tears because my father had recently passed. It had been a year since my father had passed. He had walked on. And so before I could resume holding sacred ceremonies like the Sweat Lodge and those sorts of things, I had to go through the wiping of the tears. And it was a beautiful ceremony. And recognizing that our loved ones who have crossed over, they don't want us to continue to cry and to mourn and to be bogged down in the woulda, coulda, shouldas, but to live on and to have joy once again. And so that sacred ceremony recognizes the life of the loved one, recognizes that life goes on after the life of the loved one, and says the mourning period is complete. Cindy! She's saying, I was told not to emote. Yes. Oh, so you know what I'm talking about. Cindy, we missed you this past weekend. I was told not to emote and not to discuss the beings that I saw. Yes. Oh my. Well, you know, sacred site. Let's just talk about sacred site. All right, good thing about balancing heaven and earth is there's nobody on after me. So here we are, right, for as long as we want to be here before my battery runs out on my, yeah, we missed you, Cindy. Holy camole, it's never the same without Cindy when we're in New England, right? Sacred sight. Sacred sight, some people call clairvoyance. Sacred hearing, clairaudience. Sacred feeling, clairsentience. That is a sacred gift, the gift of the spirit, the charismata, the charisms, the expressions of spirit are sacred. And in some places, people are not allowed to talk about it. And I do believe that that's a remnant from the Dark Ages, from those times that all of the charisms had to go underground. And at one time, it was okay to bear the stigmata, you know, like Padre Pio, to bleed out. They say that Padre Pio bled a half a cup of blood out of the palms of his hands every single day after receiving the stigmata. And so that's okay to some, right? It's held in very high regard if you are part of the hierarchy, perhaps. But for those people such as ourselves that, you know, we're just doing our thing, we're doing our life, and we have these gifts that are very sacred, the gift of feeling, hearing, smelling, seeing, tasting, spirit. Sometimes if we're not wearing the cloth every day or the little white collar, it's not held as sacred. But I'm here to say to you, if you have the gift of sight, the gift of hearing, that is a gift. It is sacred. How are you going to walk with those gifts? That's the sacred walk. Years ago, when Sister Irene Mary said to me, Denise, what you've been given is a gift of the Spirit. It's not a sideshow, right? It's not the soft shoe. It's not a carnival act. You need to walk with the gifts that God has given you in a good way, in a sacred manner. Because remember that these gifts are the gifts of the soul. And so if you're going to help others through the use of your third sight, your ability to hear, remember that you are dealing with another human being's soul, with their spirit, and that is sacred. Treat it as sacred. And so you're not going to find me at, you know, a carnival or any of that kind of thing doing what it is that God gave me to do, which is the ability to see or hear and all of those good things, what most other people cannot see or hear. And so it can be hard growing up in a household where those things are not revered, or in a household where display of the gifts of the Spirit was deemed mentally unstable. I happen to believe that some of the most gifted psychics or seers or sensitives in the world spent their lifetimes locked up in psychiatric hospitals, or spending time in psychiatric hospitals only to be medicated out of the gifts that Creator gave them. And sometimes that raises people's eyebrows when I say it, but it's good to raise eyebrows because sometimes then it engages something in the brain that says, I never thought about it that way before. So there can be a variety of reasons why we are brought up in homes or communities or churches where the gifts of the Spirit are not recognized and honored. And a lot of times it's fear. This is a new age that we're living in, this Aquarian age, this time of the eighth fire. You're welcome, Cindy. In which we recognize the gifts that we've been given as sacred. The determining factor for a lot of people as to whether or not we're working with them in a sacred manner is, do we do our work with love? Is it all about earning the almighty buck when we're doing our work? Or is it that we're doing our work out of the love of doing the work and the love of our fellow human beings that are having this experience on earth with us? One time, Sister Irene was talking to Father Mike, her friend, and Father Michael said, well, I believe that Denise has, these gifts and things. And he said, I guess what determined it for me after speaking with you is, she does her work with love. Don't you agree, Irene? And Irene Mary said, well, I believe that Denise does her work with love. And Father Michael said, well, I believe that she does too. And in my mind, that's a true expression of the charismata, of the charisms, of the spiritual gifts. So I believe that walking in a sacred manner really comes down to, are we walking with love? It doesn't come down to, are we more pious than the other person? Are we more stern? Are we more strict? Do we have more rules of conduct? Or are we walking with love? And love includes laughter. It includes being goofy at times. It includes having fun and having joy. It doesn't have to include having a stick up your in order to be deemed as sacred. For some people, unless they are very pious and rule-oriented and then it's only sacred. If there are lots of rules, lots of time constraints. Cindy, that's right. Love, baby. Yeah. Are you doing it with love and laughter and reverence? Nobody needs a stick up their hind end in order to be sacred. Nobody has to have a million rules of piety. That's how I feel about it anyway, but that's just me sitting here in my reading chair with all of you talking about sacred. And some people are so regimented in their lives and so regimented in everything that they suck the sacred out of sacred. To me, gee. You want to have some really good laughter, go to a sweat lodge on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and go into one of those lodges. There is so much laughter. There's a lot of prayer. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of deep discussion, and there's a lot of laughter. Holly is saying, I could tell you were legit and walk with integrity right away. Oh, thank you for that, Holly. I appreciate that. I try to walk with integrity. It's not always easy. People aren't always enamored with integrity. They're just not. Not everybody is digging that. Sometimes when you have integrity, that means you have to make the tough decisions and make the tough calls. And that's not always easy. It means having the tough discussion sometimes. And praying about a lot of stuff a lot of times. So it's not always easy. But being sacred means being human. Being human is sacred. We all decided to come to this outpost together, I believe. This outpost called Grandmother Earth, Gaia, Razia, lots of names for Grandmother Earth. And in our sacred state, we all said, hey, let's go to that outpost called Grandmother Earth and bring our light. Sometime we'll talk about the story, the Lakota story of the sun dance, right? When the earth kissed the sun and all of us decided that we were going to come here with our light from the sun to light up Grandmother Earth. And so every year we have the sun dances to celebrate that we come through the sun to get here to Earth. That sounds kind of familiar to a couple of other things, huh? And when we got here, we decided that we were going to do some things and meet some people and shine our light. I think all of that is sacred. We're going to have sacred encounters, sacred conversations, sacred teachers, sacred exchanges. I happen to think every exchange is sacred. They're not all pleasant, But I do believe that every encounter is a holy encounter, even those that you have in the grocery store. Because to not consider every encounter as holy means that maybe we're not recognizing every living thing as holy. Every living being is holy. Sometimes it's holy cow, really? And other times it's holy cow, really? But it's all holy. I think our life is a gift from the Creator, and the way in which we live our life, thank you, Billy Mills, is our gift back to the Creator. That's sacred. How are you living your life? You doing the best you can? Are you doing it with love? You doing it with some laughter? Are you doing it by uplifting other people? Helping other people find the light within themselves? Doing art? Yeah. Every one of you that's listening to me, that's hanging out with me right now, thank you for shining your light. That is sacred. Thank you for honoring me by spending some time of your life. This is your lifetime, right? This is time out of your life that you are sitting on the other side of this screen, hanging out with me. I consider that sacred. I create sacred space before I sit with all of you. What does that mean? That means I invite the sacred to be present with all of us during this conversation so that we have the perfect discussion with one another. Oh, thank you for that, Margaret. I feel very blessed to be here with all of you. It's sacred to share these ideas. Yeah. Who's here? Patty, who is here? Patty Hirschberger? I'm hoping that I get to see a bunch of you this Saturday at Archangels, Angels, and Demons. So we're going to be all over the gamut here with Degrees of Light on Saturday at 10 a.m. until noon. Hey, Patty. My lovely friend from Traverse City, Michigan. Yeah. Amantha Murphy is going to be here in a week with Ancient Irish Shamanism. That's sacred work. She walks in a sacred manner. Oh, thank you, Sonia. Well, Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn. Give those grandbabies a kiss for me. Those little twins, little sweethearts. Sacred stuff being a grandma. That's right. Oh, it's good to see you too. Yeah, here we are just kind of all hanging out together. What a beautiful thing, talking about sacred. Sacred isn't always in a church pew. Yeah. Del Marie is saying, it appears to me that people do not accept or understand the spirituality of one when you start opening yourself to the sacred way of life, when we try to walk that chunka luta. Yeah, the red road. The chunka luta, the red road. That is a very sacred road. It is a very sacred road because we're walking with the teachings of Grandmother Earth. The red road, those are the veins, the waterways of Grandmother. And Del Marie is one of my favorite teachers. She also happens to be my sister. Hey, Del. So the subject came up this past weekend about the fact that that you and Guy and Barbara are not my blood relatives, that you are my adoptive relatives. What would you say about being my adoptive relative versus being my blood relative? If you wouldn't mind putting a little something in the chat room, because it is a sacred relationship. I will. Kisses all around. Nice to see you. They are little sweethearts. They are smiling and laughing now, looking forward to my session with you. Me too. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, sacred friendships. I get to see Marilyn at Great Lakes Retreat, where I first met her, and every so often here at the Star Nations Academy East. Yeah. I started to have a conversation last night with Barbara, but her phone cut out. She must have been sitting maybe on top of the telephone pole at Mr. Haney's store. She kept saying, click. Did I just hang up on you? Click. Right? Yeah. Yeah, Cindy, you know what I'm talking about with the conversation about relatives, that sometimes only adopted people really can understand the sacredness of an adopted relationship, because that's what we know as our relationships. And I think we have a little bit of a different perspective on that. We can have sacred relationship with our animals, right? How do we treat our animals? That's also sacred. I have one that's kind of sort of sleeping right now, looking at me with one eyeball partially open. That's Gabriel, right? And I consider him to be a very sacred being in my life, along with all of my kidlets and all of, the horses. And somebody once asked me this past weekend, so how many kids have you got? I said, well, between son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, seven children. Lucky me. How blessed am I, right? That's a lot. And I love it. I love every bit of it. Okay, just checking the stream there for a moment. So, sacred, walking in a sacred manner, sacred ceremonies, sacred relationships. For me, the glue that holds all of those together is love. I am pretty gosh darn blessed. I am. 7 kids, 3 horses, 2 dogs, critters in the forest. I'm very blessed. How many sisters and brothers and grandchildren and nieces and nephews. One of my nephews recently asked if I would marry he and his soon-to-be wife, Dana. How interesting that there will be a Dana Kronk. My birth name was Dana, and my birth mother asked that my name be kept as Dana, so I would have been Dana Kronk. That is my maiden name. And my dad decided, needing a good French-Canadian name, that my name should be switched to Denise. And now there will be a Dana Kronk. So what a beautiful sacred circle that would bring me around to marrying or performing the wedding for my nephew, who is marrying a Dana. In fact, both of my nephews have Danas in their lives. The universe never ceases to amaze me. The wonder of it all never. Sometimes I just look at Todd and I smile and shake my head. He goes, I know, it's pretty astounding, isn't it? It's pretty amazing the way that it all works. And I feel very blessed to be somebody, frankly, who's an adopted person, because I have no preconceived ideas of what family is. For some people, family is just a very tight-knit clan of a group of maybe a half a dozen or a dozen or maybe more people. Definition of family is sacred, and it's really sacred conversation right now. It appears that some people do not understand that making a commitment to be a hunka does not even come to where you are considered blood adopted. It is a sacred way beyond that, because you are chosen to belong to a family. Lila washte, wopila chue. Yeah. It is sacred way beyond that, way beyond blood. Thank you for that. Cindy, I know that you would appreciate that as well. It is. It is sacred beyond blood. I was having a conversation with my adoptive brother, Don. And Don found his biological family. And he and I were having a conversation in the living room. And he said, I do have a half biological sister. And he said, but in my mind, you're my sister. You are my older sister. And I looked at him and I said, and you're my little brother. That's sacred. The way that Creator brings us to this earth plane And the way that we come together in friendship or family is so sacred. And thank you for saying that, Chue. I appreciate that. Star Nations magazine, the October issue, is now on the newsstand. And Del, there's a photo of you and I. And it's the photo from the story that I wrote for the magazine and also for my book about, it's called My Moccasins, Our Star Ancestors, and the Story of the Lakota Star Quilt. And the photo is of the ceremony this July. The photo is where you're putting the moccasins that you made for me on my feet. And the story that you told me about the way that you made the moccasins for me, and the sacredness that goes into your beadwork. Del Marie considers her beadwork sacred. It is sacred, and you can feel the sacredness of anything that Del has beaded because she prays as she does her beadwork. I have these extraordinary moccasins that my sister loves me enough that she created for me and then placed on my feet. And in a ceremonial way, there at the powwow ground, stood me up in my moccasins. The moccasins, it's called the Moccasins Are on the Road ceremony, moccasins on the road. And stating to everybody in the powwow grounds that, this is our sister, this is our relative, and her moccasins are now on the ground. They're on the ground, and she will walk with us for the rest of our lifetime as part of our Tioshpaye, as part of our family. And how beautiful it was then when we had an intertribal dance and the relatives hugging me and saying, we've known you all these years, and it's so good that you're our relative. Welcome to the Tioshpaye. And I think that sometimes for people who aren't adopted, the feeling of that moment, the feeling of watching Del, I have a beautiful photo of Del announcing to everybody in the powwow ground. Now, when I was adopted as a little girl, I don't have memories of that. So as an adult woman, to be at a sacred ceremony where a sacred relationship is being announced in such a manner, I still, because it only happened in July, there are still some times where I just have to sit and be with that. I need to sit and be with that and to pray in a grateful way. The gratitude can't be expressed. Our belief is that the ancestors bring a hunka to you to be in your life. Hunka, that is the word for an adopted relative, somebody who will be brought into your family. For my kids, there's no discerning between Aunt Del and, Aunt Shelley or, right? My kids have aunties that they adore. On my side of the family, all of our members of our family are made this way. What a blessing. What a blessing. And the sacred teachings, what a blessing. The sacred work, what a blessing, and all with love. Every time I show the moccasins to people, I brought the moccasins with me to New England, Chue, because so many people in New England have heard me talk about this ceremony. And so I brought the moccasins to show everybody. They're sacred and they reflect sacred relationship. Yeah. Yes, it is a spectacular photo. Todd took it. Yeah. sacred. Love, joy, tears, laughter, being human. Understanding that we are all related. Mitakuyasan, mitakoye oyasi. Mitakuyasan, we are all related. And making relationship as teacher, student, friend, family, sacred. Ceremonies within those circles, ceremonies for ourselves, relationship to the creator of all things and all things that the creator has created, sacred. Carrying ourselves in a good way, sacred. Taking care of our bodies, sacred. Taking care of one another, sacred. Sacred. With that, everyone, thank you for joining me here in my sit spot, in my reading nook. And thank you for being you. Thank you for shining your light. I'm sending my love to each and every one of you. And thank you for being part of my sacred life, of my sacred circle. Blessings be, everyone. Sweet dreams and dream well. Peace out.